An area where a lot of Christian marriages have difficulty is kind of like the flip-flop of the culture that says men and women should make all the decisions equally and no man should tell a woman what to do. And sometimes if she knows better, she's going to make that decision no matter what. And as we've seen, that gets us into a lot of trouble. Many women are like me, you're an alpha woman, and you're like, I know better. What the heck are you thinking? Well, one of the problems in marriages is when we go the total opposite too, is people enter their marriages saying, I want to do things God's way, and I'm just going to just let the man be the head, and he's going to do everything. He's going to make all these decisions, and I'm going to submit to everything he says. Well, the problem with that is they often think that means that the woman has no voice, that she has to just kind of say a little bit of what she thinks, and then that's him. And I see a lot of people getting extremely frustrated and marriages breaking because they didn't know how to find that balance. Now, we're in a broken world, we're in a fallen world. This is always going to be difficult because Satan infiltrated, and until we go to heaven, it's not going to be perfect. But the way that system is supposed to work, if we follow God's plan, can be absolutely ideal. And here's the difference. The way that many Christians, young Catholics, really good kids want to go into their marriages doing it right is what I just said. Okay, I'll let him say everything. And then you get these women who end up being so mousy and they don't even have a voice, and they know what's right, but they don't say it, or they say it, but then they're building up resentment and anger on the inside because her husband's doing the wrong decisions. And then the husbands are kind of like, well, I'm getting used to being an overlord, and so I'm telling you. And then the first time she does speak up for herself, he has a hard time because what's going on? Why are you doing that? So anyway, here's the deal. Men and women are supposed to make all decisions together. The woman has been gifted with very special differences in her brain and her way of operating than the man. So she has a lot to offer in the decision-making functions in their marriage and in their family. And the man has been given specific gifts as well. Now, he's been given headship. And many of you who've seen some of my videos in the past have heard me talk about the differences in the male and the female brain. And of course, there's hormonal differences. But I just want to reiterate real quickly the gifts, the difference between men and women. So you've got your left hemisphere, your right hemisphere. You've got this corpus callosum in the middle, which is what I call the freeway system that sends messages from the left brain to the right brain. And when we're in our mother's wombs, our brains are exactly the same for a time. If something starts in the left hemisphere, it makes connections to the right, it goes back and forth, and it's making relationships with all the other areas of the brain. But the male baby, when he's in his mother's womb, gets a shot of testosterone at some point, and it singes these pathways in the corpus callosum, and meaning his left hemisphere and his right hemisphere no longer easily speak to each other, to greater or lesser degree. But for the most part, they can no longer make relationships between how does this particular thing that we're talking about affect this thing. They're very single-minded, focused, and go directly into that particular area of which you are discussing or talking about. And we can see ways that that is such a benefit because men can, in fact, stay focused. You give them a task, they do the task, they check the box, and they happily move on to the next task. Well, women aren't like that. Women, if you give them a task, they're like, oh, wait a minute, this is going to affect this, is going to affect that, is going to affect that. And that's why we say women are typically experts at relationships, because not only can they see the relationship between your husband and your children, and he's like, well, honey, yes, I know that you need to discipline your child, but if you do this based on his or her personality and this thing that just happened to them at school, that's how this is going to play out. And so the woman has an insight that the average man doesn't have. And so when a decision needs to be made about discipline or about finances or about moving or about jobs, anything, the husband and the wife are to come together. Now, there's some basic decisions that, look, you don't need to all talk about. Is honey, you make that decision, do it. No, honey, you make that decision. It's fine. But in the bigger areas, you are to come together and say, this is how I see it. Well, this is how I see it. And the reason I think God gave men the headship is because he gave women the greater gifts in this area. So what that does is that requires the man to act in humility, right? Or meekness. And so meekness has such a bum rap these days. I think meekness equals weakness. And I've heard other people say, no, meekness is weakness turned inside out. Cute little catchphrases. But what meekness really is strength under control. So it's like, I really just want to do this and give you my input. Let's go. But a man who's meek is a man who's like, I have strength. I'm going to listen to this woman of mine because God gave her to me. She's my wife. And then take that and say, God, help me to see what I don't see. Help me to make the decision for my family. And then make the decision. Sometimes he's going to make a wrong decision and sometimes he's going to make a right decision. But the final decision in difficult topics is left up to the man. So he's going to have to answer to God because he is acting in God's stead. He is the authority over the family and God's the authority over the man. So if he makes an intentionally bad decision, he's going to have to answer to God for that. But that still doesn't change the woman's responsibility to respect the man's decisions, right? Or respect the man, at least. I may not respect his decision, but I'm going to respect my husband. I may not appreciate his decision, but I'm still going to do my best to respect my husband. So the man's gift is he gets to make the decision. He gets to be the head. But his downfall, his weakness, the area that God's making him have to exercise his muscles, is that he has to be meek and mild. And he needs to submit his decision-making to at least listening with true openness and willingness to consider her perspectives and then make that decision. Like it says in the book of Romans, we must work out our salvation with fear and trembling. It's the same thing. Make these decisions for your family in fear and trembling because you will have to answer to God for them. But then that's why for women, because, the feminists are like, you don't submit to any man. That was Satan infiltrating. Look at how screwed up we've gotten when we've stopped submitting to our husbands. They have that gift of authority. And when we try to usurp it, it screws up our marriages because it just goes against the man's DNA and it makes him resent you. And it's like, oh, you're the boss of me, and then give up, or sarcastic or bad patterns develop. So the woman, your gift is that you do see things that he doesn't see. Your area of submission is that, I'm going to do my best to communicate to him, but I do have to submit if I really believe going left is the right decision, even though he goes right. And just telling him, honey, I trust you. I believe that you're trying to do what's best for family. And if you say that, a husband will actually be more inclined to do what's best for the family instead of stoking his pride and say, well, I'm going to do what I need to do. So women weren't given the headship of the family or the marriage, but they were given the greater gifts and seeing the big picture as it relates to relationships of things and relationships, especially between the humans in these decisions. And that, my friend, is how a husband and a wife are supposed to come to decisions. They equally should have a conversation. He should be willing to hear her perspective. She should be willing to hear his. Then they should pray together and say, okay, let's let God's will be done. Because that, by the way, praying also drops cortisol, which is your stress hormone. And it's been shown to connect and build the bond in a relationship and so many other things I'll talk about in other videos. And then you say, honey, what you say we're going to do. You're more likely going to get the better decisions for your family that way. And as time goes on and you develop trust for one another, I trust that my husband really is trying to do what's best for the family. And the husband says, I really do trust that my wife is not trying to usurp my power, my authority, I should say, but she is really just trying to aid in my decision-making. When you both begin to trust each other, you become more content with each other. You become more in sync with each other. And you become just more, your relationship, the two becoming one, actually takes place much more easily then because you're using the gifts that each of you have in going forward and being the couple that God intended you to be. So that's your lesson for today. I hope that helps. Let me know your thoughts. How has that played out in your marriage? How have you failed in that playing out in your marriage? I could give you a million examples of how it's failed me by not doing it the right way. But once we started doing things the right way, we pretty much had smooth sailing or smoother sailing. So I'm Dr. Christine Bacon. Thanks for watching this Bacon Bit. And as always, remember to live your life sunny side up.